G'day. This is Charlie, and I'm coming to you with your daily dose of business tech inspiration. We're going to be talking about the importance of the GDPR, your compliance, and using it in email marketing. Episode 299 today. GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation. It is the data protection and privacy law for individuals that applies to people within the European Union, the EU, and the European Economic Area, EEA. It not only addresses the way data is handled within those areas, it also addresses the transfer of personal data outside of the EU and the EEA areas. The idea is to give individuals control over their personal data and simplify the regulatory environment for international business by unifying the regulation within the EU. Honestly, as someone who builds websites, it's a bit of a nightmare. I am often asked by people, do I need to worry about the GDPR? I'm not selling into the EU. So my answer is kind of simple. It's like, is anyone from the EU going to visit your site? Is anyone from the EU going to give you their personal data to sign up for a newsletter? If the answer to any of that is yes, then yeah, you have to worry about the GDPR. So why don't we just err on the side of caution and comply with the GDPR straight up and just deal with it? And that's what we do. What does it all mean? And there's a few misconceptions. There's lots and lots of grey areas. And it's not that it might just be that the legislation itself is a little grey, but it's also the way it was brought out and the fact that it's out of the EU and we're not within the EU. So for us, it's a foreign thing. It's something that we need to think about and we really need to dig into. What does it all mean, though? First thing is about obtaining consent. The GDPR requires businesses to obtain explicit consent before sending marketing emails. Now, I have heard people say, well, that means you must have double opt-in processes for compliance. And the answer to that is not necessarily. The provision itself, and I'm reading off of some information I've got on the other screen here, requires that consent be freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous. Now, what that often leads to is people saying, we'll just use double opt-in because that solves all that. Sure. If you don't like using double opt-in, or if you've got a process that using double opt-in will actually break the flow of something, I'm not a fan of it, right? You don't need to use it. And if you don't need to use it, why use it? Yes, that's one reason, is it helps you meet that. But as long as you have got clearly specified terms on your site about signing up, filling in a form, as long as when you go through, you say you understand that you are giving us permission to blah, 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 and they tick a box and then they can go through, that addresses that requirement. So make sure that your consent is clear, it's specific, you are informing them what you're doing when they sign up to your newsletter, and it is unambiguous. So use clear language, basically. So make sure you obtain consent. You must have clear privacy policies. Now, this isn't such a big thing for me. Google has required us to have privacy policies for years. Clear privacy policies that are linked on our site that they can find. Otherwise, we don't even get listed in the search engines if we don't have a privacy policy. Make sure, though, that it outlines how you collect, store, use subscriber data, and you need to include it in all email communications. So make sure that you've got that policy on your website, make sure it's clearly linked, make sure people can find it. And when you're sending out emails, make sure you tell people where they can find the privacy policy to read it if they need to. Okay. Data protection. Implementing strong security measures to protect subscriber data and comply with the GDPR's data protection requirements is a must. So make sure that You are storing data securely. You've implemented SSL on your site. Make sure you know what data you're collecting and only collect the necessary data. If you don't need to be collecting phone numbers or addresses, don't collect phone numbers or addresses. The minimum data that most people need to collect for a newsletter is a name and an email address. And if that's all you need, that's all you should be collecting to start with. The only time you should be collecting more data is when your processes require you to do it. Are they making a purchase and you need to be able to identify them? Make sure that the way you store it is in line with the GDPR's data protection requirements. That then brings us to the next point, which is the right to be forgotten. Subscribers must have the options to unsubscribe easily, and businesses must honour requests to delete personal data upon request. So what that means is if you've signed up to a newsletter or some process has managed to collect your data as you've gone through it, if someone comes back to you, first of all, you've got to give visitors the ability to say to you, contact you and say, can you take my data away, please? Can you remove my data from your database? And when they do, you must remove it. You can't keep a copy of it. You can't back it up somewhere and have a backup of it. You've got to get rid of it. You've got to forget that they were part of the list, part of the database. You do need to keep detailed records of how and when subscribers opted in, as the GDPR requires proof of consent in case of audits. Okay, what does that mean? We actually have to keep those records anyway. If someone can't, if one of the spam agencies, one of the spam compliance agencies comes to us and says, how did you get this list? We should be able to point to it and say, well, this person signed up on this form using this IP address on this date. And, show them what the form looks like. So, and that's the same thing that you need to be doing for the GDPR. They've just solidified it. They've made it concrete. If you aren't sure whether you are able to keep those records, you do need to go back to the platform you are using to collect your leads and make sure that those provisions are turned on, enabled, whatever it is, and that you know how to get them. Most email marketing platforms like MailChimp, MailerLite, Zoho campaigns all have those abilities. And if I'm not mistaken, you actually can't allow someone onto your list until you have provided the very minimum of data that they need to be able to prove that you're in compliance with those laws. There are penalties for non-compliance, of course. Failing to comply with the GDPR can lead to hefty fines and damage your brand's reputation. So make sure that you are adhering to these requirements. Make sure you're doing it. Make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure you know what your requirements are and that you have got all the record keeping that you need to be able to prove that you're doing the right thing. Not trying to scare you. I am really just trying to outline how serious these requirements are and how serious the EU takes them in terms of making sure we're all following them. Yes, you could absolutely block EU and EEA countries from your site and say, nope, we're just not going to deal with you. Is it worth it to you, or is it worth doing it just a little bit of work and make sure that you are squeaky clean? And that way you're not only in compliance with the GDPR, but you're also in compliance with the other spam laws that are that are around the world. Up to you. What do you guys think? Have you had issues with the GDPR? Are you compliant with the GDPR? Have you not even thought about it till now and gone, oh, we need to make sure we're doing it? I would love to know. Leave some comments wherever you are watching or listening to this video. You can DM me on any of our social media channels. You can come and join us on our locals community, askcharlyleetham.locals.com, and join the conversation there. Guys, I hope you have a very happy and spam compliant day. Spam law compliant day. And I will see you tomorrow when we're going to talk about creating a welcome email series for new subscribers. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.